What Buddhism says, the Matrix got right. Buddhism wants you to wake up. The Matrix wants you to wake up. Tonight, they don't mean the same thing, and the difference matters more than you might expect. In 1999, a bald child sat cross-legged in a waiting room, holding a spoon that bent in his hand without being touched. He looked up at a man named Neo and said, "Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth." Neo asked what truth. The child said, "There is no spoon." And then, "It is not the spoon that bends. It is only yourself." Tonight, I want to show you what that child knew, what Neo missed, and why you may have missed it too. Because the Matrix asks one great question: is reality real? And Buddhism says, that's the wrong question. What you can answer, what the child was already answering, is a different question entirely. Tonight, we find the right one, and you don't need a red pill to take it. Chapter 1. What the Matrix Gets Right. Before we go anywhere, let's establish what kind of film we're actually discussing. The Wachowskis have spoken about their influences, not vaguely, not as afterthought. In a 1999 Warner Brothers interview, a viewer asked how much of the film's philosophical layering, Judeo-Christian, Egyptian, Arthurian, Platonic, was intentional. Their answer was 2 words: all of it. Asked whether The Matrix had Gnostic overtones, they replied, "Do you consider that to be a good thing?" I would. When Buddhism came up specifically, they said, "There's something uniquely interesting about Buddhism and mathematics, particularly about quantum physics and where they meet, that has fascinated us for a long time." Larry Wachowski, now Lana, put it more precisely to the New York Times. The film was about making mythology relevant to the modern context, relating quantum physics to Zen Buddhism, investigating your own life. This is a film that meant to do philosophy. It borrowed from Plato, Descartes, Gnosticism, Buddhism, Lewis Carroll, knowingly. So let's take it seriously on those terms. Tonight, we're not scoring points. We're looking at what the film gets right. And there is a great deal before we look at where it stops short. Parallel 1, the diagnosis. Start with the diagnosis. Because before The Matrix asks what liberation looks like, it asks what most people are doing right now. Its answer is unsparing. Morpheus tells Neo, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so inured, so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight to protect it. Now hear the Buddha on the same question from the Dhammapada, verses 85 and 86. Few are the people who reach the far shore. These others simply scurry along this shore. DHP 85 to 86. Same diagnosis. 2 very different traditions, 2 very different centuries, 1 shared observation. Most human beings do not seek awakening. They organize their lives around not being disturbed. They fight to preserve the structure they know, even when that structure is causing them suffering, especially when it is causing them suffering, because at least it is familiar. The Buddha called it avijja, ignorance. The Matrix calls it the system. Here is where we need to be careful. In the film, the blue pill choice reads as a kind of moral failure, the willingness to prefer comfortable illusion to hard truth. Buddhism sees it differently. The blue pill choice isn't cowardice. It's the current. It's what water does when nothing displaces it. Most beings, most of the time, are simply carried by the current of habit, of clinging. What the Buddha called samsara, the continuous, rolling on. Blaming the current for flowing is not the Buddhist move. Noticing that you are being carried by it and asking whether that's what you want is. Morpheus is right that most people are not ready. What he doesn't say, and what Buddhism does, is that the readiness is not about courage or intelligence. It is about a very specific kind of attention, one we'll come back to shortly. For now, the film's diagnosis of consensual ignorance is essentially correct. The people are asleep. The question is what to wake up to. Parallel 2, the spoon. The Matrix's most famous scene is not a fight. It's a child, a bald child, cross-legged in the oracle's waiting room, holding a spoon that bends in his hand without being touched. "Do not try and bend the spoon," the child says. "That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth." Neo asks, "What truth?" "There is no spoon." "There is no spoon." Then you'll see that it is not the spoon that bends. It is only yourself. This is the scene most often cited as the film's clearest Buddhist moment. And there is something to that. In the discourse on the foam and the bubble, the Phenapindapama Sutta, SN 22.95, the Buddha compares the 5 components of experience to 5 deceiving appearances. Form is like a glob of foam on the Ganges. Feeling is like a water bubble. Perception is like a mirage. Fabrications are like a banana tree. No heartwood when you cut it open. Consciousness is like a magician's trick. Thanisaro Bhikkhu's translation of the key line reads, "Whatever a monk sees, observes, and appropriately examines any perception, it would appear empty, void, without substance." Now, this is where a careful distinction matters, and it matters for the whole rest of what we're going to say tonight. Bhikkhu Bodhi, one of the great living translators of the Pali Canon, adds a critical gloss to this sutta. I'm labeling this as his interpretation because there are Buddhist teachers who read it differently. Bodhi writes that the discourse is not intended to suggest an illusionist view of the world. His reading, the sutta teaches that our conceptions of the world and of our own existence are largely distorted by the processes of cognition. And this is Bodhi's careful move. These false conceptions arise from a base that objectively exists, namely the 5 aggregates. Read that carefully. There is a base. The Buddha is not saying nothing exists. He is saying that your perception of what exists is a construction, a mirage laid over something that is not itself a mirage. Now bring that back to the child and the spoon. There are 2 ways to hear there is no spoon. The Matrix will teach us the first way. There is no spoon because the spoon is a digital object, machine-generated code, ontological illusion. Take that reading, and the film has a specific philosophical destination. One we'll get to in chapter 2. The Buddhist reading is different. It is not that no object exists in the field of your awareness. It is that your perception of that object as a solid, self-existing, inherently graspable thing called spoon is constructed by sanya. Perception overlays. The mirage is not the ground. The mirage is what your mind lays on top of the ground. This sub-distinction is what Bodhi is protecting, and it matters because if you miss it, you can walk out of the spoon scene with 2 very different conclusions. Conclusion 1, everything is fake, so nothing matters. Conclusion 2, the way I habitually see is a construction, so it is possible to see differently. The child, cross-legged in the waiting room, is doing something specific. He is not denying the spoon. He is not weaponizing the insight. He is simply not participating in the reification. He has stopped adding, "There is a solid spoon here that resists my will." What is left when that is subtracted is the spoon bending. because he was never wrestling with it in the first place. Keep that image. We will return to it. Parallel 3. The teacher. The third thing the film gets right is Morpheus. To see why, we need to look at a Pali term that has almost no direct English equivalent, Kalyanamitta. The word is usually translated as admirable friend or noble companion, and neither quite carries what the Buddha meant. In SN 45.2, Ananda approaches the Buddha and offers what he thinks is a fine observation. This is half of the holy life, Lord. Admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie. The Buddha corrects him. Don't say that, Ananda. Don't say that. Admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie is actually the whole of the holy life. Not half, the whole. What kind of friendship deserves that description? Not the generic kind, not the coffee shop kind. A Kalyanamitta is specifically a spiritual companion. Someone who models the path, points to the door, and walks alongside without walking for you. Now hear Morpheus. I'm trying to free your mind, Neo, but I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it. And later, there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. Whether or not the Wachowskis intended the specific echo, the structure is familiar. The teacher who points but cannot cross for you. The one who offers the pill but cannot swallow it for you. The one who says, in effect, I have walked this. I can indicate. I cannot transfer the walking. This is not a small thing. Across contemplative traditions, Buddhist, Christian, Zen, Sufi, the same structural relationship recurs. The Buddha compared his teaching to a raft, MN 22. Someone must hand you the raft. You must still row. Notice what Morpheus does not do. He does not take the pill for Neo. He does not argue Neo into taking it. He presents the choice, red pill, blue pill, and makes explicit that either is a legitimate choice. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. That last sentence could sit inside a Pali Sutta without any editing. Here is the point that matters. This is not one of those cases where the film accidentally coincided with something Buddhist. The teacher-student structure is one of the oldest documented features of contemplative life. What the Matrix captured is not a Buddhist invention. It is a shape that Buddhism, Zen, Socratic dialogue, and mystical Christianity all recognize. The Wachowskis put a leather-coated version of it into an action movie. The shape is intact. The film gets this right. And when a film gets one thing this right, it earns the credit of being read carefully on everything else. Parallel 4. The willingness. The fourth parallel is the pill itself, not the plot function, the choice. Neo is offered two futures. One is easier. Return to sleep. Remember nothing. Wake up in your apartment believing what you already believed. One is harder. Swallow the red pill and lose the ground beneath every certainty you have. In MN2, the Buddha calls this choice by a specific name, Yoniso Manasikara. Thanissaro Bhikkhu translates it as appropriate attention. Bhikkhu Bodhi and Nyanamoli translate the same Pali as wise attention. Both renderings are legitimate. I'll be using both across this video, so hear them as pointing at the same thing. The sutta contrasts appropriate attention with its opposite. Inappropriate attention circles. Was I in the past? Am I? Am I not? What am I? How am I? Producing what the Buddha called a thicket of views. Appropriate attention asks 4 questions instead. What is stress? What is its origination? What is its cessation? What is the path leading to its cessation? Neo's choice to swallow the red pill is, structurally, a movement toward Yoniso Manasikara. It is the choice to attend to the uncomfortable question, rather than remain in the comfortable one. It is the refusal to keep asking, "Am I okay?" and the beginning of asking, "What is actually going on?" This is a correct move. It is one of the most Buddhist moments in the film. The willingness to lose your prior world for the sake of a truer one. This is what the Buddha praises again and again in the suttas. The problem is not what Neo chooses. The problem is what happens after. 4 Buddhist parallels. 4 things the Matrix gets right. Diagnosis, perception, teacher, willingness. This is a serious film making serious moves. And now, having said that, we need to look at where the film stops, because it does stop, and where it stops is not a minor detail. Chapter 2, where it stops short. Return to the child in the waiting room, the scene we opened with. He holds a spoon that bends without being touched. He says to Neo, "Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth." Neo asks, "What truth?" The child says, "There is no spoon." We noted at the end of the last chapter that this scene has 2 possible readings. It is time to look at what Neo does with the insight, and how that differs from what the child was doing. The child, cross-legged, bends the spoon by not resisting it. There is no strain in his body, no clenched jaw, no reaching. He has simply subtracted the assumption, there is a solid thing here that resists me. What remains is the bending, because he was never wrestling with anything. Neo, minutes later, uses "there is no spoon" for something else entirely. He deploys it against Agent Smith, against bullets, against the walls of the Matrix. The insight becomes a weapon, a tool for control, for domination, for reshaping the false world to his will. Notice what has happened. The child's move was a letting go, a subtraction, an act of not doing. Neo's move is an amplification, an addition of power, an act of maximum doing. The child treats the insight as a release. Neo treats it as a lever. These are not the same move. They are opposite moves. If you take the Buddhist reading of the spoon scene seriously, the reading Bodhi carefully protected in the last chapter, the child is closer to what the Buddha was pointing at than Neo ever gets. The child has let go of the reifying perception. Neo has weaponized the concept of unreality to become more powerful within it, which raises a question the film never quite asks. If Neo needed the red pill, and Morpheus, and the entire crew of the Nebuchadnezzar to arrive at what a 6-year-old in a bathrobe already understood, what exactly was the point of the journey? We'll come back to that. But first, the larger question. To what do we awaken? Scholars of religion and film, the researchers Flannery Daly and Wagner, have described The Matrix as, in their words, a film about the possibility of awakening. I'll cite that framing carefully. It is theirs, not something the Wachowskis said, but it is a useful frame because it forces the question the film itself never puts directly. Awakening. To what? Every awakening tradition has to answer that question. The answers are not the same. Here is the Gnostic answer, which The Matrix follows most closely. The material world is a false creation, produced by a lesser deity or a malevolent demiurge. Real being, real light, real freedom lies elsewhere, above or beyond the false world. Awakening means acquiring the saving knowledge, gnosis, that recognizes the falsehood and then escaping upward, out of matter, back to the light. In classical Gnosticism, matter itself is the problem. The body is a prison. Salvation is exit. That is the shape of Neo's arc, almost line for line. Wake up. Recognize the false world. Escape it. Arrive in the real world, Zion, deep beneath the surface of the earth, where humans have bodies, weapons, and a resistance movement. The film's structure is Gnostic in its bones. Here is the Buddhist answer, which is fundamentally different. Matter is not the problem. Bodies are not the problem. This world is not the problem. Clinging is the problem. Craving is the problem. The construction of self and other and mine, that mental process, running continuously beneath every experience, is the problem. And that mental process runs in any world, simulated or biological, prison or paradise. The Buddhist wake-up is not a relocation. It is a cessation, not the cessation of the world, the cessation of the specific mental machinery that turns every world into suffering. This is the fork in the road the film reaches, and then walks past without seeing. Baudrillard's verdict. There is a Frenchman we need to introduce, because he is the one who saw this most clearly. His name is Jean Baudrillard. He wrote a book in 1981 called Simulacra and Simulation. In the film, when Neo needs a place to hide his contraband software, he opens a copy of that book. The book is hollow. Neo has cut out the pages, and the chapter it is open to, you can see it briefly on screen, is titled On Nihilism. That book is not a random prop. Keanu Reeves has confirmed that Baudrillard was assigned reading before he took the role. They said, okay, we'd like you to play Thomas Anderson/Neo. I had to read Baudrillard. The Wachowskis knew what they were referencing. Now, what did Baudrillard actually argue? His central claim, in the plainest possible language, was this: in the modern world, we no longer experience reality directly. We experience representations of reality, photographs of things, descriptions of things, signs pointing to things, and, Baudrillard's harder claim, at a certain point, the signs stop pointing to anything real underneath. The photograph replaces the thing. The description replaces the experience. The map replaces the territory, and then the territory disappears, and only the map is left. He called this condition hyperreality. And here is the sharpest edge of his argument. In hyperreality, there is no hidden real world beneath the signs waiting to be recovered. There is no original the copy is a copy of. The copies go all the way down. Now hold that thought next to the film. The Matrix says there is a real world beneath the signs. It is called Zion. Take the red pill and you can go there. The signs are false. The reality is true. And salvation is the passage from one to the other. Baudrillard's response, in an interview with the French journalist Aude Lancelin in June of 2003, was scathing. He said the film had misread him almost completely. His words verified. The most embarrassing part of the film is that the new problem posed by simulation is confused with its classical Platonic treatment. This is a serious flaw. And then this, the sentence that would haunt the film's philosophical reputation. The Matrix is surely the kind of film about the Matrix that the Matrix would have been able to produce. Read that carefully. Baudrillard is saying, the film that was supposed to critique the illusion has itself become an instance of the illusion. It sells you a comforting story. There is a real world. You can escape to it. A hero will guide you, which is exactly the kind of story that the culture of simulation produces to keep you inside itself. The hollow copy of Simulacra and Simulation in Neo's apartment is the film's most accurate self-diagnosis. A container that promises depth, gutted, repurposed as storage. The philosophical source of the film, called out, hidden inside itself, open to a chapter called On Nihilism. Baudrillard might have said the hollow book was the truest thing on screen. The noble search. The Buddha 25 centuries earlier, made a related observation from a completely different angle. In the Arya Pariyesana Sutta, MN 26, the discourse on the noble search, the Buddha describes two kinds of seeking. Thanissaro Bhikkhu's translation: the ignoble search is when a person, being subject himself to birth, seeks happiness in what is likewise subject to birth, aging, illness, death, sorrow, defilement. The list of things the Buddha names as ignoble targets is long and specific. Spouses, children, slaves, animals, gold, silver, every kind of acquisition. Not because these things are evil, because they are subject to birth. They arise, they change, they end. Building your liberation on top of them is building on sand that is already dissolving under your feet. The noble search is different. The noble search, seeing the drawbacks of birth, seeks the unborn, unexcelled rest from the yoke, unbinding, aging less, illness less, deathless, sorrowless, undefiled. Notice Thanissaro's distinctive rendering. He translates nibbana as unbinding, rather than the more familiar extinguishing. He speaks of rest from the yoke, of drawbacks. These are his choices. Other translators render differently. What matters is what he is pointing at: the unborn, the unmade, the unconditioned, that which is not subject to arising and passing away, and therefore cannot be lost. Now apply this frame to the matrix. Zion is subject to birth. The film makes this painfully clear. By the sequels, Zion is under siege. Machines are digging toward it. There is war, casualty, terror. Zion has children who will die. Zion has fighters who will age. Zion has love that will be lost, and grief that must be borne. Zion is samsara wearing different clothes. If you relocate from the matrix to Zion, the Buddha would say, you have not addressed the search he named. You have simply found a more honest starting point. The war is still happening. Craving is still happening. Birth, aging, and death are still happening. The second noble truth, SMN 56.11, that craving is the origin of suffering, was never a claim about which world you happen to be in. Craving arises internally, from the meeting of a sense base and its object, MN 38. Zion has sense bases and objects. The machinery runs. Changing worlds changes the fuel. It does not change the fire. The raft and the arrow. The Buddha compared his teaching to a raft, MN 22. Thanissaro renders the key passage this way: I have taught the Dhamma compared to a raft, for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of holding on to. You should let go even of Dhammas, to say nothing of non-Dhammas. The image is precise. A raft is for crossing. Once you have crossed, you set it down. You do not carry it inland, over your shoulders, forever. Thanissaro adds an important caveat here, and I'll label it as his emphasis. Read alongside the water snake simile, which sits in the same discourse. You get a second point. You have to hold the raft properly in order to cross. Grasp too loosely, and you drown. Grasp too tightly, and you cannot let go when you reach the shore. The raft must be held firmly for the crossing, and then, at the goal, not before, set down. Neo takes the red pill. That is his raft. It is a crossing tool, and it works. It enables him to see the simulation for what it is. But Neo is still holding the raft over his head. He has built his entire identity around, I live in the real world. The raft has become a raft museum. It has become the thing it was meant to leave behind. And here is the deeper move. The one the Buddha would make immediately. Even if the red pill worked as advertised. Even if Zion is genuinely more real than the Matrix. Buddhism's next question is quiet and inescapable. And now that you are in the real world, Neo, are you free of craving? Do you still age, get sick, die? Do you still want and fear and lose? If yes, and the sequels confirm yes, you need a second pill, which is not a pill. Which brings us to the man with the arrow. In MN63, the Buddha tells a story about a man struck by a poisoned arrow. His friends bring a surgeon. The wounded man refuses treatment. He says, "Not until I know who shot me. What caste was he? What was his name? What kind of bow? What kind of wood? What kind of feathers? What kind of poison? Was it a leaf or a root?" The man dies before he gets his answers. The Buddha's point is not that these are stupid questions. His point is that they are the wrong questions for a man with an arrow in him. Is reality a simulation? The Matrix's central provocation is the poisoned arrow question. It might be a fascinating question. It might even be answerable in some future century. But whether or not you live in a simulation, the arrow is in you. Birth is happening. Aging is happening. Death is happening. Craving is happening. Grief is happening. The path that addresses these does not wait for a confirmed answer about substrate physics. Morpheus cannot give you that answer. The oracle cannot. Even the machines cannot. You are wounded now. The question is whether you want treatment. The pivot returned to the child. He is sitting cross-legged in the oracle's waiting room. He is bending a spoon by not resisting it. He is 6 years old. He has not taken a red pill. He does not have a mentor named Morpheus. He is not going to escape to Zion. He is in the matrix, the false world, the machine-generated illusion. And he is already doing the thing the whole film is supposedly about. Now watch what happens next. Neo receives the insight. Neo will spend the rest of the movie and the 2 movies after it trying to defeat the machines, trying to save Zion, trying to become powerful enough to bend not just spoons, but bullets, walls, agents, physics itself. The child sat down. Neo stood up. That is the difference between the Buddhist insight the Matrix stumbled into and then left behind. The film is not wrong that awakening is possible. It is not wrong that most people are asleep. It is not wrong that a teacher can point. It is not wrong that willingness to face the truth is the first movement of practice. What the film is wrong about is what awakening is. It thinks awakening is discovering that the false world is false and then leaving it for a real one. Buddhism says that is a story you can tell yourself in any world. The real work is not the discovery. The real work is what the child was doing, not adding, not weaponizing, not escaping, simply releasing the mental grip that turns spoons into things to be conquered and worlds into things to be escaped. Which brings us to the question Chapter 3 has to answer. If awakening is not escape, then what is it? Chapter 3. What Buddhism offers instead. If the Matrix asks, is reality real? Buddhism, 25 centuries earlier, was asking something quieter and more useful. What is suffering and what is its cessation? These are not the same kind of question. Is reality real? Is asked from a position that presumes to be able to answer it. A position somehow outside all realities, capable of comparing them. The Buddha never claimed that position. He claimed something more modest and more powerful. Return to Yoniso Manasikara, appropriate attention in Thanisaro's rendering, wise attention in Bhikkhu Bodhi's. Same Pali, both pointing at the same thing. Inappropriate attention circles the substrate questions. Was I in the past? Am I? Am I not? What am I? How am I? These generate what the Buddha called a thicket of views, a tangle where each answer requires a further question, and the seeker never leaves the thicket. Appropriate attention asks 4 things instead. What is stress? What is its origination? What is its cessation? What is the path leading to its cessation? Notice what these four have in common. They are first person. They are present tense. They are answerable, not with certainty about the nature of the cosmos, but with careful, honest observation of what is actually happening in this body and this mind right now. You can ask these questions in Zion. You can ask them in the Matrix. You can ask them wearing a virtual reality headset, or lying in a hospice bed, or sitting in a chair on a Tuesday afternoon. The answers arise from the same investigation regardless. This is why the Buddha's teaching survives the "is reality real?" question, rather than depending on it. The teaching does not need reality to be a certain way. It needs you to look carefully at what is happening. The Buddhists wake up. So what does Buddhist awakening look like if it is not a movement from one world to another? In the Anattalakkhana Sutta, SN 22.59, the discourse on the not-self characteristic, the Buddha addressed 5 monks in the deer park at Isipatana. It is one of the earliest recorded teachings delivered shortly after his own awakening. He walked them through each of the 5 components of experience: form, feeling, perception, fabrications, consciousness. For each, he asked, "Is this permanent or impermanent?" Impermanent. Is what is impermanent ease or unsatisfactory? Unsatisfactory. And is it fitting to regard what is impermanent, unsatisfactory, subject to change, as "this is mine, this is myself, this is what I am"? No, the monks answered. It is not fitting. Now, this is where a careful distinction matters, and I'll label it as Thanissaro Bhikkhu's interpretation, because it is his emphasis and other Buddhist teachers read it differently. Thanissaro reads the not-self teaching as a strategy, not a metaphysical claim. In this reading, the Buddha is not declaring there is no self. He's teaching a specific way of viewing that dislodges identification. Do not regard these aggregates as self. Do not build I and mine on top of them. That is a precise instruction for a precise purpose, the ending of clinging, not a doctrinal announcement about what does or does not exist in the universe. Bhikkhu Bodhi and other translators read the teaching more strongly, more metaphysically. This is a live disagreement within the tradition, not something to resolve tonight. But when you hear not self, you should know that even careful Buddhist scholars disagree on how to hear it. What both readings share is this: the awakening being pointed at is not the discovery of a truer self hiding behind the illusory one. It is not the revelation of what you really are underneath. It is the loosening of the mental grip that turns each aggregate into me and mine. There is a related discourse, the Ananda Sutta, SN 44.10, where a wanderer named Vachagota approaches the Buddha and asks, "Is there a self?" The Buddha is silent. Vachagota asks, "Then is there no self?" The Buddha is silent again. Vachagota leaves, disappointed. Ananda asks the Buddha why. The Buddha explains, "If I had answered there is a self, I would have sided with the eternalists. If I had answered there is no self, I would have sided with the annihilationists. Neither would have brought this wanderer closer to what he needed to see." The Buddhist wake-up is not "you don't exist." It is not "you really exist beneath the illusion." It is a specific move away from both, because both, asked with inappropriate attention, produce more thicket, the arrow and the realms above. This is why the Buddha's teaching does not require an answer to "is reality a simulation?" Return to the man with the arrow. The arrow is in you now. Aging is happening. Loss is happening. Craving is happening. Grief is happening. The path that removes the arrow does not wait for a confirmed answer about the archer's cast. even if reality is a simulation. The arising and cessation of craving in this body still works the way MN38 described it, even if reality is not a simulation, the same. This is one of the strangest and most freeing features of the Buddha's teaching. It runs independently of what the universe turns out to be made of. Now, one more piece, briefly. Buddhist cosmology has better worlds. This is not commonly discussed on Western Buddhist channels, but it matters here. The tradition describes celestial realms, Deva realms, of extraordinary beauty, longevity, and pleasure. Beings arise there through accumulated skillful action. They live in conditions we would call heavenly. They are still in samsara. When their skillful karma is exhausted, they fall, they die, they are reborn in less pleasant conditions. Their heavens are impermanent. The Buddha's point in mentioning the Deva realms is not to promise them. His point is, even the most beautiful, most durable conditioned world is not liberation. Zion is not even the best heaven on offer. And even the best heaven, the Buddha says, is not enough. What is enough, the far shore the Dhammapada spoke of, is not a place. In the Udana, one of the shortest texts in the canon, the Buddha uses language he rarely uses. He says, there is, monks, an unborn, unbecome, unmade, unfabricated. Ud 8.3, not there is a better world, not there is another realm. There is an unborn, a dimension of experience that does not participate in the machinery of arising and passing away. Not a place, not somewhere you go, something you cease clinging your way past. You cannot get there by relocation. You cannot get there by swallowing a pill. You get there, if get is even the right word, by the ending of a particular kind of doing, by the cessation of craving, by the letting go the child was already doing with the spoon. A Buddhist neo-so. What would a Buddhist neo do? He would not fight the machines. Not because fighting is morally wrong, but because he would notice something first. The need to fight is a craving. The urgency to defeat the enemy is tanha. The identification with I must save Zion is exactly the kind of self-construction the Buddha spent his life pointing at. A Buddhist neo would sit with the question, where does this need arise? What is it made of? What is it trying to accomplish? He would notice the fear underneath it, fear of loss, fear of death, fear of meaninglessness. He would investigate that fear the way a naturalist investigates a rare species. Carefully, without hostility, without haste, he might discover something the film's Neo never has time to discover. That the enemy he is fighting is not the machines. The enemy, if the word even applies, is the constructing itself. The relentless building of self and other and world and threat that turns every situation, every world, every century into a battlefield. And here is the strangest part. Once he sees that clearly, the machines might still be there. Zion might still be there. Agent Smith might still be there. But the reactive urgency to defeat them, the felt need that turns awareness into war, may quietly release. That is not passivity. It is not surrender. It is what the Buddha called nibbinda, a turning away, not from action, but from compulsion, from the addictive quality of I must. What remains when compulsion is subtracted from action is response. Careful, appropriate, unattached response to whatever the situation actually asks for. The film cannot show this. It is not a cinematic experience. It does not involve leather coats or bullets or slow-motion combat. It happens quietly, inside the body of a person sitting still. Which brings us, one more time, back to the child. closed. The child never took a pill. The child did not need Morpheus. The child did not escape to Zion. The child sat cross-legged in the oracle's waiting room, held a spoon, and stopped participating in the reification that turns spoons into things to be conquered. "It is not the spoon that bends," the child said to Neo. "It is only yourself." And in that yourself, right there in the very last word of the exchange, is the question the film never returns to. What is this yourself? This is where Buddhist inquiry begins. Neo will spend 2 more films fighting. He will believe himself the one. He will believe Zion depends on his choices. Every one of those beliefs is a form of construction. Every one of them generates the craving the Buddha called the second noble truth. Every one of them keeps the mental machinery running. The child needed none of it. We began tonight with a promise to show you what the child knew, what Neo missed, and why you may have missed it too. Neo missed that the awakening was already available in the waiting room. He missed that the movement of not resisting was itself the movement he had traveled the whole film to acquire. No journey was required, no pill, no mentor, no relocation to a truer world. Simply the release of a specific mental grip. You may have missed it because the film's whole grammar teaches you to miss it. Awakening looks dramatic. It involves escape. It looks like slow-motion combat and leather coats and neon rain. It is somewhere else, behind the veil, above the false world, waiting in a real place you have not yet reached. Buddhism was quietly pointing at something else. Not somewhere else. Something else. Not behind the veil, beneath the grip. Not somewhere you go. Something you cease clinging your way past. The Dhammapada, verses 85 and 86. Few are the people who reach the far shore. These others simply scurry along this shore. DHP, 85 to 86. Morpheus quoted a version of that verse in his own words. Most people are not ready to be unplugged, but the far shore Morpheus was pointing to was Zion, a material world subject to birth, aging, war, and siege, a shore of the same river on the other side. The Buddha's far shore is not a shore. In the Udana, UD 8.3, he used language he almost never used. There is, monks, an unborn, unbecome, unmade, unfabricated. Not a place, not a realm, not somewhere you swim to. A dimension of experience that does not participate in the arising and passing away, that cannot be lost because it was never gained. No red pill can take you there, but a question can. The right question. The one the Buddha named as Yoniso Manasikara. The one that does not ask, is this real? But asks, what is happening and how does it end? The one that stops circling the substrate and starts investigating the arising. Right here, in this body, in this breath, in this room where you are sitting. The one the child was already living. Tonight we honored the matrix because it earned honoring. Its diagnosis of consensual sleep is right. Its perception scene points at something real. Its teacher-student structure carries a shape as old as the contemplative traditions themselves. Its willingness to face uncomfortable truth is the beginning of appropriate attention. Where it stops short is where the film reinstates the very structure it claimed to critique. It says, there is a real world beneath the false one. It says escape is possible, and the escape is a relocation. It says liberation looks like a hero, standing tall, defeating the enemy. Buddhism does not disagree with Zion. Buddhism disagrees with the frame that says Zion is the answer. Because whatever your Zion is, whatever real world you believe waits beneath the false one, the second noble truth got there before you. The arrow is still in you. Zion has arrows too. The question the film cannot ask, because its grammar cannot hold it, is the question you can ask tonight without leaving your chair. What is stress? What is its origination? What is its cessation? What is the path leading to its cessation? These 4 questions have a strange property. They can be asked in any world. They can be answered in any world. Simulated, biological, prison, paradise. It does not matter. The path works where you are, which is why, one last time, we return to the child. He was in the false world. He knew it. He did not fight it. He did not escape it. He did not spend the movie becoming powerful enough to bend it to his will. He simply sat and let go of the reifying, and the spoon bent because he was not holding it in the first place. That is the Buddhist wake-up, not a movement across worlds, a movement across attention. Wake up, Neo. But not like this.